What ultimate price must be paid to reverse an irreversible fate? Within the dusty libraries of ancient Sumeria, mysterious Sumerian tablets detailing the myth of Inanna's descent offer a profound glimpse into a cosmic journey that defied all known boundaries of reality. Here, the radiant Queen of Heaven, one of the most powerful gods of the Anunnaki Council, had willingly surrendered every worldly symbol of her celestial power to face the absolute stillness of the great below. She stepped bravely through 7 towering gates, leaving the comforting light of familiar stars entirely behind her. Those heavy wooden doors sealed her within a dusty empire that cared nothing for divine displays of supremacy. But perhaps the most staggering mystery hidden within this Mesopotamian legend is not how she entered those shadows, but how she managed to come back from a realm of no return. This daring goddess had ventured too far by attempting to claim a throne that was not her own, and for her transgression, the solemn judges of the underworld had delivered their sentence, halting her vibrant motion permanently. She was left suspended in a deep slumber upon the ancient lapis lazuli surfaces of those dark palace walls. The underworld kingdom of Ker was built upon an unbreakable foundation of laws, forming boundaries which were not to be crossed. This quiet domain belonged exclusively to her dark sister, Ereshkigal, whose authority bowed to absolutely no one, and under her fierce gaze in the land of dust, both mortal kings, immortal gods, priests, and even common criminals alike were all subject to the same treatment. To escape such heavy gravity would require far more than sheer brute force or dizzying displays of celestial power. The ancient rules governing that lightless realm were flawlessly designed to protect the fragile system of universal equilibrium. Bending these strict parameters meant navigating a complex web of deeply esoteric conditions. The conditions of an order that had already been established long before the first Anunnaki gods were formed from the primordial ether of the ancient abyss. These deeply hidden mechanics protected the entire world from falling to chaos. Only those who possessed knowledge of the highest esoteric magic could ever hope to even comprehend such intricate mechanisms. Every living soul was bound tightly to this undeniable cosmic architecture, whether from the heavens above or the earth below. If it could be done at all, pulling the goddess out of her deep trance would require a profound understanding of this natural balance and a willingness to pay the ultimate price. Her last chance to return lay in a clever contingency plan that was left in place before she had ever even taken her first step through the entrance to the netherworld, in the city of Ganzir. It lingered in the air like a tiny thread of hope, connecting her now dormant spirit to the vibrant world of living populations above, where an unprecedented rescue mission would soon rely upon the making of strange new entities, beings who were capable of crossing the boundaries between worlds. Yet even so, a chilling hidden law still waited patiently in the depths, and it was not to be trifled with. This strict cosmic decree demanded a harsh price for any soul who dared to leave the shadows, a price far heavier than she had already paid at the 7 gates during her descent. And as a result, her eventual return as the Morning Star became much more than a mere tale of rescue. It marked the profound birth of a mesmerizing seasonal pattern, one that still dictates our world to this day, an eternal cycle of rest and renewal. As we trace the wandering path of this forgotten time in antiquity, a time when gods still roamed the earth, we witness a breathtaking journey that perfectly illustrates this delicate cosmic harmony. But to fully understand it, we must gently draw our gaze toward the eastern horizon of ancient Sumeria, where a warm night breeze rustles softly through the quiet palm orchards of Uruk, Dim oil lamps flicker gently along smooth clay walls, casting long dancing shadows across the winding canals nearby. The sprawling metropolis rests securely under a dark canopy of slowly turning constellations. In the peace of night, the familiar sounds of bustling markets fade into a deeply restorative silence. Thousands of ambitious workers slumber peacefully within their woven reed homes, while the vast celestial vault rotates with a flawlessly calculated precision, charting the quiet passage of every long hour. Glittering embers of starlight reflect beautifully across the calm waters of the Euphrates River. This pristine earthly garden breathes softly in harmony with the heavens above. The steady rhythm of life continues its patient hum just above the hidden depths of the underworld. But a vital piece of this beautiful picture was still missing from the sky. Their beloved goddesses, radiant light as the evening star, Venus, remains trapped within an inescapable domain of dust. If you are listening to this in the still quiet of the night, let us know where and when you are joining us from in the comments section. It is quietly comforting to realize that countless listeners, scattered across distant lands and different time zones, are all settling into the same quiet journey through the forgotten echoes of human history. And if you are enjoying this Sumerian history for sleep narrative, finding it helps you relax, or even drift off, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps support our efforts to keep bringing you these ancient stories each week, and continue reaching others who are searching for the same calm place to relax and unwind. If you would like uninterrupted sleep and longer versions, those are available to you through the Legends of the Dawn membership. Now we return to a time thousands of years in the past, when early stargazers looked up into that vast expanse of the sky with solemn curiosity, wondering where the guiding light of their revered goddess had gone. The absence of her brilliant energy had left a subtle void in the turning heavens, and the entire world felt the weight of her loss. Only a dedicated few would truly come to understand the staggering sacrifice that was about to take place below their feet, because one devoted figure remains awake in the cooling shadows of their most sacred temple courtyard. Her loyal vizier, Ninshubur, waits anxiously beside a polished stone altar, keeping silent vigil while the cosmos slowly rotates in an endless celestial sea. Her faithful companionship represented the purest form of devotion, the kind of dedication that transcends the boundaries of ordinary time. She knows the strict instructions left behind by her sovereign before embarking on her perilous journey, but she had also hoped she would not need to rely on them. A heavy sense of unease began to ripple through the quiet atmosphere of the sleeping city. In those shaded temple walls, the deep fragrance of sweet river silt mingles with the lingering aroma of burning cedar resin, anchoring her restless mind to the physical reality of the darkening world around her. She takes a slow, steadying breath to prepare her spirit for whatever comes next, and with her, the entire landscape seems to pause in a state of suspended anticipation. Her tired eyes stay firmly fixed upon the flat eastern horizon, where she watches patiently for a radiant light that is now desperately overdue. 3 incredibly long days drifted slowly past those silent canals of ancient Uruk, and 3 cold nights had brought absolutely no sign of the goddess's return. A heavy realization settled deeply into her weary spirit. The allotted time her master had planned for this perilous journey into the deepest realms of the earth had expired. An overwhelming shadow of loss began to envelop her heart. Ninshubur knew with absolute certainty that this meant her beloved sovereign still remained trapped in the underworld below. And so, this faithful divine vizier prepared to set their desperate contingency plan into motion. She stood bravely within the shadowed temple walls to fulfill her final sacred duty. In a solemn ritual observed by all immortal customs, she tore her elegant clothing into ragged strips, symbolizing profound cosmic sorrow. Her shivering form was dressed in ruined garments of mourning to reflect her deep internal pain. And when she was ready, her bare hands reached slowly for a heavy wooden drum resting quietly nearby, the drum of grief. Striking its tightly stretched leather produced a resonant, booming sound across those quiet plains, producing a mournful rhythm meant to shatter an eerie stillness of midnight. These solemn echoes rolled rapidly upward toward the grand assembly halls of the Anunnaki. Her calls of despair echoed throughout their luminous shrines, where this loyal servant carried her urgent plea directly to the highest immortal authorities. She traveled first to a magnificent storm god known as Enlil, the god of air, wind, and the great storms which swept across the entire planet. It was he who had ushered in the first breath, creating the very atmosphere of the earth. In the Anunnaki pantheon, his powers were second only to his primordial and now dormant father, Anu, the king of all gods. And in the absence of his father's active guidance, he himself essentially fulfilled the same powerful role, serving as the highest authority among their council. He presided over a sprawling mud-brick sanctuary located in the city of Nippur. Approaching his high throne required immense courage from this simple earthly attendant. Ninshubur fell to her knees before him, begging for an immediate intervention. Tears streamed down her face while she described the trapped goddess. Enlil listened patiently, yet his ancient face remained completely rigid through her plight. He looked down upon her mourning figure with a sense of detachment, and perhaps it was the kind of detachment which was unavoidable for such a deeply powerful ruler, one who had reigned over the earth since its earliest formative days, who had had thousands of millennia to fully understand the intricate workings of reality. Disrupting the delicate balance between life and death was simply forbidden by ancient decrees, and so the storm god felt he must maintain his absolute position on universal order, without hesitation. He refused to extend his powerful hand into the dusty empire of the netherworld. He operated entirely upon a strict adherence to universal cosmic law, the very laws that govern all creation. The boundaries separating the two realms were absolutely uncompromising. The high god reasoned the Queen of Heaven had willingly chosen her path, seeking to obtain the dark secrets of the abyssal realm, the one domain her luminous light could not touch. She had ventured eagerly into the land of no return, to pursue her own bold ambitions, and for such reckless transgressions she must pay the ultimate price required to maintain the delicate equilibrium. Enlil then slowly repeated that same ominous warning that she herself had been issued at each of the 7 gates during her descent. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. His strict devotion to this cosmic order forced the Queen's vizier to seek aid elsewhere. Wiping her tired eyes, she turned away from his high terrace in defeat. Her solitary footsteps carried her rapidly toward another towering temple platform of the heavens. Here resided Inanna's own father, the glowing moon deity named Nanna. He rested peacefully within his own grand sanctuary, radiating a soothing silver aura across his quiet halls. Ninshubur entered his pristine courts with a trembling voice, echoing in the dark. Again she pleaded passionately, hoping he would rescue his trapped celestial daughter from her dusty prison. Her rhythmic drumming of grief bounced softly against the polished stone walls, and Nanna felt a deep sadness rippling through his immortal spirit. But even this compassionate moon god could not override the fundamental rules of existence. he repeated that exact same rigid philosophy. Intervening in the realm of departed souls would severely disrupt all natural harmony. This luminous Lord of the Night refused to challenge the solemn laws of the underworld. Allowing a prisoner of the earth to simply walk free would shatter the very foundations of reality. He reminded her that the abyss demands strict obedience from all wandering travelers, and the unbending rules of creation were far more important than any one single life, no matter how precious. With two powerful elders refusing to act, she felt the crushing weight of defeat. Yet her faithful determination would simply not allow her to remain complacent. She remembered those final hushed instructions the Queen had whispered just before her fateful departure into the shadows. One final glimmer of hope remained hidden far below the sunlit terrestrial surface, where Enlil's brother, an incredibly wise water god named Enki, resided within the depths of the freshwater ocean, a boundless aquatic refuge known to early priests as the Apsu. Ninshubur travelled swiftly toward his mysterious watery domain to present her final petition, approaching those cool, tranquil shores with a renewed sense of urgency burning in her chest. Her ragged garments fluttered softly in the gentle breeze, sweeping off those glassy southern seas. Here, Enki served as the supreme keeper of esoteric magic, possessing an in-depth knowledge of arcane incantations which whisper of a sorcery older than time. The ancient priests even claimed he fashioned humanity itself from pure river clay and the divine blood of the gods. And in his great wisdom, he possessed a uniquely profound understanding of how fragile the balance of reality truly was. He listened closely to the desperate recounting of her tragic tale, immediately recognizing the devastating consequences of leaving the goddess of love and war, of light and motion, suspended forever in darkness. Without her vibrant energy, our earthly garden would slowly wither into dry dust. She had provided the earliest formative soils with the fertility needed to develop barren wastelands into a lush oasis of plenty. She had led whole armies into victorious battles, empire after glorious empire. And according to various texts, it was she who bestowed the gift of knowledge, the Holy May, upon the very first antediluvian kings of ancient Sumeria, kings who descended from the heavens to guide the dawn of mankind into the glorious civilizations they were destined to build. She was the twin sibling of the sun god Shemesh and the equalizing force to her darker counterpart and sister, the Queen of the Underworld. The heavy burdens of that dark kingdom were never meant to permanently extinguish such a magnificent light. With her imprisonment, the silent dust of Ker had claimed a vital piece of our planetary alignment, leaving the beautiful harmony which connected them entirely broken. A world stripped of all passion could not possibly sustain its blooming populations. Enki knew that her eternal slumber would ultimately unravel the delicate cosmic tapestry governing all natural cycles. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it would come as inevitably as the rising tides. The wise water deity felt a deep well of compassion rising within his chest, and in that moment Ninshubur had finally found the hero she needed. Enki agreed to orchestrate an unprecedented rescue mission from his watery throne. But overcoming those strict laws would require immense ingenuity, not sheer force. He could not send mighty warriors or rely upon traditional weapons to breach its gates. Rescuing Inanna would demand a completely different kind of strategy, one which would require his arcane knowledge to bend the very fabric of reality itself. Marching glorious celestial warriors down into those lightless corridors would only provoke a devastating cosmic war, one there was no hope of winning, because the unforgiving ordinance of her dark domain was specifically designed to keep out powerful immortals seeking to breach its gates. To safely navigate through the impenetrable fortress of Ganzir, whose very peak served as the entrance to the underworld, meant finding a way to operate outside all recognized boundaries of natural existence. And so, in the soothing stillness of his beautiful aquatic domain, the wise water god began to craft a wonderful and unexpected solution. He knelt softly beside the tranquil shores of his freshwater abyss to gather the most pure of raw earthen sediments, mixing the loose soil with sweet river currents to produce a highly pliable clay. He pressed this enchanted mud carefully between his fingers to fashion something our cosmos had never seen before. In yet another brilliant and miraculous act of creation, two entirely new entities took shape within those cool shadows of the sunken temple. The ancient scribes recorded their obscure names as Kuagaru and Awakalaturu, strange beings whose mere existence is nearly impossible to comprehend, brilliantly engineered to exist within the quiet interdimensional space between realities. They were fashioned without any specific gender, and their unusual forms were neither fully divine nor entirely human in their fundamental nature, rendering them virtually invisible to rigid checkpoints guarding the great below. Such a profound detachment from the ordinary patterns of universe granted them a peculiar kind of invulnerability. The crushing gravity of deep bedrock simply could not anchor their ethereal bodies. Floating gracefully above the damp clay floors of the Apsu, the wise water god knew that their unusual nature was perfectly suited for such a perilous mission. He observed their weightless movements with a quiet sense of satisfaction. These mysterious species represented yet another supreme victory of his biological mastery over creation. Being wonderfully formless allowed these tiny creatures to slip past the massive wooden gates of Ker like a gentle draught of dusty air. Enki leaned closely to whisper specific instructions into their newly formed minds. He prepared his unusual ambassadors for a delicate interaction with Ereshkigal, the Queen of the Underworld. His voice rang with a deep reverberation, to which they listened with absolute obedience. The return of the morning star relied completely upon their ability to display genuine compassion. They were not to demand her immediate release, or threaten the Dark Queen with celestial retribution. Their only weapon would be an overwhelming display of profound cosmic empathy. To ensure that a successful resurrection could actually take place in such a barren realm, he entrusted them with two sacred elements. The mysterious food of life was placed gently into the waiting hands of his first creation, while a precious vial containing the restorative water of life was carefully given to his second messenger. These potent items carried the concentrated essence of vitality itself, the only substances capable of reversing the gaze of death that had been instilled by the seven dreaded judges. Having been given these provisions, those two unusual messengers turned away from the shimmering pools of the Apsu to begin their silent descent. Their journey downward was remarkably swift, as they floated effortlessly through narrow earthen fissures. The heavy shadows stretching across those dusty corridors posed absolutely no threat to their fluid shapes. They navigated around Neti, the imposing gatekeeper, without making a single sound against the cold stone floors. The massive gates of cedar timber and tarnished copper offered no resistance to their ghostly progression. They drifted peacefully across those seven towering thresholds, the very same ones that had previously stripped their celestial sovereign of her power. Soon they arrived at the grand lapis lazuli throne room, where they felt the immense gravity of the earth pressing inward. This stunning architecture had been carved directly from pure bedrock to create a lightless palace. polished blue stones caught the faintest of ethereal light, creating a cinematic contrast against the heavy dust, an awe-inspiring monument dedicated to the endless slumber of all departed souls. Stepping across the final boundary would normally strip away all remaining traces of worldly comfort. Its oppressive atmosphere was specifically calibrated to extinguish the last lingering sparks of terrestrial ambition. But these weightless emissaries glided effortlessly through that stagnant chill, without a single shiver. A low rhythmic groaning now echoed against those dark polished walls, which muted them like a stifled whimper. The formidable queen of departed souls was not sitting proudly upon her exalted seat of power. Instead, she lay curled upon the bare floor, struggling under the exhausting burdens of her domain. A deep weariness consumed her entire trembling form, as her dark dominion offered no comfort for this overwhelming distress. Those tiny emissaries fluttered silently down into the dim chamber, in a gentle approach. Rather than announcing their presence with loud demands, they simply sat down closely beside her. They matched their breathing perfectly to the pained gasps of the suffering monarch, a quiet alignment that created a deeply comforting resonance. The cool, stagnant breeze barely brushed against their unusual forms as they kept patient vigil, remaining perfectly focused on their delicate task while providing emotional sanctuary. When the heavy burdens of her domain caused her to cry out at her aching insides, they gently echoed her exact words. When she wept for her tired external form, they offered that same sympathetic response, functioning as a compassionate mirror to validate her immense struggle. This simple act of shared sorrow brought a deep wave of relief to her exhausted spirit. Never before had anyone dared to sympathize with the terrifying ruler of the great below. Their genuine empathy had served to soothe the agonizing isolation that defined her dark existence. The heavy air of her throne room felt remarkably lighter as her painful groans began to slowly subside. A deep gratitude welled up within her chest toward these strange and gentle visitors. She looked upon their unusual forms with a sudden desire to reward their unprecedented kindness. And so, the grateful queen offered her soothing companions the bountiful gift of flowing river water. But they politely declined this generous reward. She then offered them a tremendously rich harvest of field grain, waiting for their joyful acceptance. Earthly rulers would have gladly sacrificed their grandest temples for such pure subterranean bounty, for these pristine elements held enough power to fertilize all the vast agricultural fields on the surface. Yet those unearthly messengers remained completely unswayed. They had no need for worldly sustenance, because they were sustained entirely by ancient magic. Ereshkigal was deeply puzzled by their refusal of her greatest treasures. But they had not descended into this terrifying void to claim any manufactured glory. She implored them to name any desired prize within her vast kingdom. The pivotal moment for their ultimate request had finally arrived. They raised their hands slowly and pointed toward the ancient lapis lazuli wall, where Inanna remained suspended upon the dark blue stone. They asked only for the motionless form of the fallen celestial goddess. Ereshkigal hesitated as she considered this highly unusual petition. Releasing a condemned prisoner directly contradicted the strict laws governing her dusty empire, but the profound comfort they had provided her carried an equally binding cosmic weight. And such a sacred exchange of favors demanded that she honor their single modest request. She agreed to surrender the pale suspended figure to her strange new guests. Those tiny creatures moved swiftly toward the faded silhouette of the once radiant queen, preparing to initiate a spectacular reversal of fate, an act which would stretch the bounds of the cosmos and test the very fabric of reality itself. A magnificent spark of revival was about to break the oppressive silence of Kur. That sacred nourishment of the gods hummed with a vibrant energy inside their hands, as they hovered gently over her stilled vessel to begin their miraculous restoration, a breathtaking resurrection that proves that even our darkest endings hold the promise of new life. Those tiny emissaries hovered gently, holding the sacred nourishment of their wise creator. A heavy silence dominated the sprawling lapis lazuli throne room, pressing inward against their ethereal forms. One gently sprinkled the mysterious food of life over her pale, motionless silhouette. The second messenger carefully poured the restorative water of life across her resting frame. This sacred infusion bridged the gap between the silence of the dark and the light of the living world, flowing smoothly into her empty veins. A magnificent spark of life broke the oppressive gloom, as a warm inner glow slowly returned to her skin. Radiant celestial energy blossomed outward from her chest, illuminating the dark blue stone of the surrounding chamber. The fallen star opened her eyes, drawing a deep breath. Her brilliant life force had been completely restored, breaking the deep slumber of the 7 dreaded judges. She stepped down from her suspended position, standing proudly once again before her solemn sister. Her beautiful light pushed back against the heavy shadows, casting long dancing reflections across polished stone walls. A profound cosmic decree had been successfully reversed, defying every known parameter of the great below. She prepared to begin her long ascent back toward the sunlit world above. But escaping such heavy gravity required far more than a magical act of restoration. An ancient debt still remains. Here, the ultimate hidden law of the underworld was suddenly revealed, halting her graceful departure. The cosmic accounting of our universe dictates that life and death must always remain in perfect equilibrium. The empire of Kur cannot simply be cheated out of its rightful permanent inhabitants. This strict rule demanded a heavy price for any soul seeking to leave the shadows. If our radiant goddess wished to rise back into the light, another soul must be sent down to take her place in the dust. The delicate scales of existence demanded that all abide by this absolute law of substitution to preserve the flawless universal order. To enforce this uncompromising decree, a dreaded group of ancient guardians was summoned directly from the void. Not the fierce judges of the underworld, for now their job was done. These silent escorts were known to early scribes as the Galla demons, guardians of the shadows, and minions to Ereshkigal. They were emotionless keepers of the balance, bound completely to the quiet currents of the deep earth. Such formless entities possessed no understanding of human mercy, comforting warmth, or mortal love. They functioned simply as a flawless system of enforcement. Designed to protect the unbreakable foundation of reality, dragging defiant lost souls to the underworld like tireless bounty hunters when necessary. The conditions of her release had been decreed, and now these terrifying figures gathered closely behind the glowing Queen of Heaven, preparing to follow her back to the surface to ensure that the price was paid in full. She solemnly accepted this chilling stipulation, turning her back on the imposing dark throne. Her long journey upward through ancient dust of the 7 towering thresholds was finally set into motion. She walked resolutely past massive cedar timbers, crossing back over the 7th gate. Her solitary footsteps echoed softly against the cold bedrock, carrying her away from that dark but awe-inspiring sanctuary. And all the while, those mysterious shadowy attendants glided quietly in her wake, their formless bodies blending perfectly into the heavy gloom. With every threshold, the crushing weight of those heavy stone walls began to gently lift from her tired shoulders. Slowly, the oppressive dust gave way to a faint, cool breeze, sweeping down from the upper atmosphere to greet her like an old friend. The dark architecture of narrow corridors gradually brightened through every gate, marking her steady return toward the world of the living. She retrieved her discarded worldly garments at each passing checkpoint, reclaiming her recognized identity step by step. Her majestic royal robe was draped softly over her shivering form once again, and the lapis lazuli measuring rod found its way back into her waiting hands, restoring her connection to human progress. Her precious golden ring and glowing breastplate were secured tightly to her body once again. She fastened her shimmering blue necklace across her collarbone, feeling its familiar celestial weight. Those winding pathways grew increasingly wide as she moved further away from the central heart of Ker. The immense isolation of the deep earth faded into a distant memory, replaced by a growing anticipation of familiar starry skies. Ascending through these dusty passageways had felt like slowly waking from a long dream, as the stagnant chill of the underworld dissolved into a refreshing memory of blooming orchards and warm sunlight. She moved with a hypnotic grace, eager to reunite with her sprawling green valleys. Yet a terrifying reality still trailed just a few steps behind. Those silent keepers of the balance hovered closely, a constant reminder of the staggering debt she still owed. Their chilling presence cast a lingering shadow over her joyous restoration, adding a heavy burden to her rising spirit. She pondered the immense weight of this cosmic ritual, wondering who must be sacrificed to satisfy their unforgiving demand. Her eventual return as the morning star would require a profound test of loyalty from those she had left behind. Someone in the waking world would have to surrender their earthly vitality to take her place. Her clever contingency plan may have saved her life, but it had not paid her ransom. The inescapable pull of the underworld reached upward with her in the form of those dark guardians, threatening to claim a new victim from her beloved sanctuaries, or take her own soul back to the depths if she failed. She approached the last gate of her exit, the entrance to Ganzir, where a dim, lightless room marked the absolute edge of mortal awareness. Finally, her grand crown was placed proudly upon her head once again, restoring her ultimate seal of social authority, as she finally passed through the threshold of the first gate. Those heavy wooden doors groaned open to reveal a starry night sky, rotating peacefully above familiar mud-brick temples. She stepped across this ultimate boundary, leaving the dusty empire behind her. A warm night breeze rustled softly through quiet palm orchards, almost as though it was welcoming her back to the sprawling plains. The sweet fragrance of blooming night flowers washed over her tired senses, grounding her mind in the presence of their vibrant aromas. But this breathtaking rescue was only half complete. The shadow attendants waited patiently at her heels, ready to enforce her debt. Their formless shapes lingered just beyond the glow of flickering oil lamps, like a dark stain against the pristine earthly garden. This daring goddess must now search the sleeping metropolis to find a suitable replacement, and her miraculous revival would carry a far darker consequence than she already realized, setting the stage for a tragic tale of judgment. She must look into the hearts of her followers to see who truly mourned her devastating absence. This test of the upper world would soon expose the fragile nature of terrestrial loyalty, alongside a blinding arrogance of mortal pride. The cosmic accounting of our universe remained unsettled, demanding an immediate payment to balance the scales. The radiant Queen of Heaven drifted softly through the warm night air, glowing like a brilliant celestial ember against the darkness. She was embarking on a profound test, closely followed by those silent demonic keepers of the balance. She guided this chilling entourage toward her most devoted sanctuaries. Her glowing silhouette first arrived at the quiet mud brick walls belonging to the city of Uma. Here, the protecting deity known as Shara was found sitting humbly in the dry dirt, stripped entirely of his divine glory. He had covered his form in rough sackcloth to symbolize his deep internal sorrow, groveling low against the dusty earth. This humble display of grief proved his unwavering devotion to the delicate scales of existence. Recognizing his profound respect for the cosmic balance, our radiant goddess felt a warm wave of compassion wash over her spirit. She immediately restrained her silent escorts, sparing this loyal deity from the crushing grip of the deep earth. The somber procession then moved gracefully onward toward another ancient settlement, known to early scribes as Bad Tibira. A gentle night breeze rustled through the surrounding grasslands, carrying the heavy scent of sweet river water across dark fields. Within these quiet borders, she found the guardian deity Latarak, who had also surrendered his earthly comforts. Draped entirely in ruined garments, his face pressed firmly into the cold clay in absolute despair. He wept bitterly for the missing morning star, demonstrating a pure understanding of the immense sacrifice taking place below. Touched deeply by his genuine sorrow, she held back those formless guardians once again, allowing this devoted caretaker to safely remain in the sunlit world. The towering temple complex in her beloved city of Uruk finally appeared on the flat eastern horizon, marking the ultimate destination of her fateful journey. This sprawling metropolis was the crowning jewel of her celestial domain, buzzing with a quiet energy even in the depths of night. She paused briefly before those massive palace walls, anticipating a tearful reunion with her beloved earthly partner. Her heart fully expected to find Dumuzi the Shepherd King, drowning in a similar state of overwhelming grief. He was her chosen husband, a mortal ruler elevated to a glorious throne to share in her radiant majesty. Surely this intimate companion would be shattered by the sudden loss of her vibrant motion, taking shelter in the shadows to weep, as was their respectful custom. She stepped cautiously across the grand threshold of her own sanctuary, accompanied closely by her hungry entourage. Warm light from the flickering oil lamps danced across polished stone surfaces, revealing a scene that defied all cosmic expectation. A shocking display of mortal pride waited patiently within those beautifully decorated halls. Instead of weeping in the dust, the Shepherd King sat comfortably upon his high wooden seat. He was dressed in magnificent royal garments, draped in heavy golden jewelry that caught the bright glow of burning cedar resin. A striking aura of unchecked authority radiated from his relaxed posture, showing absolutely no sign of distress. He was quietly celebrating his unchallenged dominion, rather than mourning the devastating absence of his queen. His lavish attire, alongside a comfortable repose, revealed a complete disregard for the fragile boundaries separating life from death, and spoke nothing of his supposed devotion. Such blinding arrogance demonstrated a profound ignorance of the sacrifices that had been made to preserve her light, as well as a general lack of empathy. A sudden wave of intense betrayal washed over the restored goddess, completely eclipsing her joyous return to the sunlit surface. She realized that her beloved partner had easily forgotten her radiant light, content to simply bask in the warm glow of her abandoned glory. To claim such unearned majesty, while his celestial counterpart suffered in a lightless void, was an unforgivable cosmic transgression. The delicate machinery of the heavens required absolute humility from those chosen to guide its earthly populations, lest they fall to sheer corruption. His proud display threatened to unravel the flawless harmony, a harmony her saviors had already taken drastic measures to preserve. Enraged by his ego, Inanna took a slow, very deliberate step toward the elevated dais. She raised her gaze to meet his surprised expression, focusing all of her divine authority into a single devastating look. And in that moment she fastened the eye of absolute stillness directly upon him, freezing the Shepherd King entirely in his place. Summoned by the call, those shapeless enforcers drifted silently into the flickering light, surrounding the now terrified mortal ruler. Their chilling presence dropped the ambient temperature of this grand hall, instantly extinguishing the warm comfort provided by his stolen glory. Silence wrapped tightly around his shivering shoulders like a living entity, as the intense gravity of the underworld prepared to collect its due. The radiant goddess then delivered the heavy decree of guilt, officially surrendering her husband to the shadows with a single word. It was a tragic, yet necessary judgment, meant to permanently restore the delicate scales of universal balance. Dumuzi had been chosen to take her place in the dust, suffering a dark consequence for his betrayal. The once proud king of Uruk was suddenly forced to confront the terrifying reality of his impending descent. A frantic desperation flooded his mind as those emotionless guardians reached out to claim his vibrant life force. He prepared to flee into the darkness in a desperate evasion that would test the very limits of human endurance. He quickly abandoned his beautifully carved wooden throne to escape into the surrounding shadows of the great city, initiating a relentless pursuit across the sprawling Mesopotamian plains, one that has been forever recorded in the mysterious Sumerian poem of Dumuzi's dream. He dashed quickly past those smooth clay walls, leaving his lavish royal garments entirely behind him, in the dust. He sought refuge within familiar agricultural landscapes to which he had once tended with devotion. Now, running like a frightened animal through the wilderness, he felt an intense chill radiating from those silent bounty hunters who drifted effortlessly in his wake. Every frantic footstep kicked up small clouds of dry soil, marking his erratic path across the flat terrain. Soft night breezes swept gently across quiet canals, rustling through tall marsh reeds. The heavy silence of this resting world contrasted sharply against his loud and frantic breathing. The Shepherd King bounded through deep ditches, hoping to evade an inescapable cosmic fate. He navigated a complicated network of irrigation channels, utilizing his intimate knowledge of local geography. His bare feet slipped against the wet river mud, but overwhelming fear pushed him ever forward. He desperately sought a secure hiding place, moving among thick groves of swaying date palms. Looking up toward the sky, he pleaded for divine assistance to outrun the intense gravity of Ker. He cried out into the cool air, attempting to reach the radiant sun deity Utu, otherwise known as Shamash. This glorious solar lord listened to his agonizing request with profound compassion. He recognized the immense weight of those strict underworld decrees, threatening to swallow his earthly companion. And so, the sun god decided to grant a temporary physical transformation to aid this desperate flight. Golden rays of esoteric magic filtered down to bathe the fleeing king in a warm glow. His exhausted physical form began to shift, guided by the flawless geometry of celestial spells. His mortal hands and human legs dissolved seamlessly, morphed into the swift limbs of a graceful gazelle. This incredible transformation allowed Dumuzi to dash effortlessly across the dry dirt and shifting sands, his newly acquired animalistic senses perceived the surrounding environment with striking clarity. The winding paths of dense marshlands offered a labyrinth of temporary safety. He navigated these muddy trails with an instinctual grace, trusting his newly formed hooves to find solid ground. The sweet fragrance of blooming night flowers and earthen river mud masked his scent from the approaching darkness. He bounded across wide-open meadows with incredible agility, perfectly mimicking the wild creatures of the rolling plains. The natural world offered camouflage, blending his silhouette into the dark foliage. But those silent keepers of the universal balance continued their steady pursuit, without a single pause. Such formless entities require absolutely no nourishment or fresh water. No tired muscles need resting, and no respite of shade was needed to sustain their energy. They moved like a creeping frost over dry ground, completely unaffected by any physical obstacles of the rough terrain. Deep trenches offered no resistance to their ghostly, hovering progression, and they tracked his vibrant life force with a terrifying precision. A faint mist began to roll slowly across those muddy banks as this relentless chase wore on. Dumuzi leaped gracefully over narrow irrigation channels, attempting to outpace his shadowy escorts. He tried desperately to sever all ties to the quiet currents of the great below. Eventually, he hid himself deep within a dense cluster of towering reeds, holding his breath as those cold shadows drifted silently past. The gentle lapping of river water against soft clay provided a soothing natural disguise for his location, and for a fleeting moment he believed he had successfully outsmarted the ancient laws of the cosmos. But it would be to no avail. Those dark demons seemed to sense his very presence. He burst from his hiding place in a final frantic sprint across the starlit meadows. His hooves struck hardened soil with a rhythmic drumming, echoing into the empty expanse. The chilling otherworldly presence followed closely at his heels, blanketing the surrounding earth in a heavy frost. Every desperate leap carried him closer to complete physical exhaustion. The sprawling agricultural fields he had once commanded now felt like an endless, punishing maze. He longed for a peaceful rest. The looming threat lurking at his heels kept his legs moving, but his stamina began to wane under the immense pressure of this cosmic hunt. By night, the radiant magic of the sun god would slowly fade from his tired muscles, returning him to his vulnerable human form. By day, he would transform back into a graceful gazelle, navigating blindly through familiar pastures, seeking one last bastion of earthly refuge. He eventually found his way toward a familiar and deeply comforting sheepfold. This quiet sanctuary belonged to his devoted divine sister, a legendary poet and immortal scribe. He collapsed heavily into soft pasture grass to catch his breath under the pale moonlight. His chest heaved with exhaustion as he surrendered to the enclosed boundaries of a wooden pen. The familiar scent of resting flocks offered a fleeting sense of security, and he briefly closed his heavy eyes to absorb the peaceful and ambient noises of the sleeping world. But mortal evasion can never permanently outrun such undeniable rules, no matter how well one stays hidden. The invisible pull of the lower world stretched long across those vast plains, tugging at his heavy limbs. The Galla demons circled around his hidden sanctuary, drawn by an undeniable cosmic tether. Their formless shapes merged with the natural darkness of the surrounding foliage, closing in from every possible direction. These tireless shadow attendants had finally arrived. Their chilling presence brought a sudden drop in ambient temperatures within the enclosure. They stepped forward with a firm determination to collect their cosmic due. There was no inherent malice in their deliberate movements, only a cold adherence to the universal design. They reached out to claim his fading spark, enforcing the heavy law of substitution. The fragile equilibrium of life and death was about to be permanently restored. Dumuzi offered no further resistance to these quiet keepers of the ancient abyss. He now recognized the staggering futility in fighting such a binding pull, the kind of gravity that eventually claims all living things. With the halt of his earthly reign, the heavy debt required to resurrect the morning star was officially settled in the thick dust. The radiant energy of his soul was gently pulled downward into the silent and lightless void, where he began his own long descent through the 7 gates of the underworld toward the dark stone throne room. Despite this tragic earthly judgment, the delicate scales of existence returned to a perfectly balanced equilibrium. But a vital piece of celestial machinery had been sacrificed to preserve the natural order, and the surrounding landscape absorbed this monumental loss with a quiet grace, the grace of a land that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless mortal and immortal reigns. Slow-moving stars continued to trace the predictable pathways across the dark canopy overhead. Yet this breathtaking story does not end in a permanent state of loss, as the dedication of one sibling and the regrets of a loving wife would shine through this dark night, preparing to orchestrate a beautiful compromise of love and sacrifice, one that would change the way we chart our years to this day. As the Shepherd King faced an eternity within the dusty abyss, his divine sister watched this tragic departure with an unwavering compassion radiating from her heavy heart. She was known to early scribes as Geshtinanna, a legendary poetess who resided among the tall, swaying river reeds. This immortal scribe possessed a deeply sensitive spirit that simply could not accept the permanent loss of her beloved sibling. She stepped bravely away from comforting safety provided by her sunlit pastures to embark upon that same perilous journey. Her solitary footsteps carried her purposefully down into the crushing gravity of the great below. Arriving before that imposing dark throne, she offered a breathtaking display of pure familial loyalty. She pleaded passionately with the solemn ruler of departed souls to share his heavy burden. A mesmerizing compromise was finally struck within those silent stone walls, satisfying the unyielding demand for universal balance. Inanna witnessed this stunning act of devotion with a remarkably softened spirit. The intense wave of betrayal she had once felt was slowly replaced by a lingering regret over his loss. She accepted and even helped to negotiate this divided arrangement to maintain equilibrium across her sprawling terrestrial domains. It was officially decreed that Dumuzi would dwell in those lightless depths for 1/2 of a slowly turning year. Geshtinanna would then courageously take his place in the dust for all remaining months of their calendar. A divine exchange which established a flawless mechanism of rotation while perfectly satisfying the strict laws of substitution. Because in the eyes of the ancients this profound agreement was no mere negotiation to a tragic tale of mortal and immortal pride. It was a divine pact which mirrored the mesmerizing birth of our shifting agricultural seasons. Whenever Dumuzi begins his long descent into the depths of the earth, the Mesopotamian plains experience a dormant dryness. Vast fields go to sleep, withering under the scorching summer heat, quietly mourning his temporary absence from the surface. Rich river soil hardens into cracked clay as vital moisture retreats far below the sun-baked ground. Early populations understood this arid period as a direct reflection of his time spent in the lightless void. A quiet patience settles over the sprawling landscape while it waits for his inevitable return to the light. During these months, mortal workers would retreat into their shaded mud-brick dwellings to seek refuge from the unforgiving solar glare. They suspend their heavy farming tools to honor the quiet period of necessary agricultural rest. And when his allotted time in the shadows was over, his loyal sister descends to honor her promise. Dumuzi rises slowly from deep earth to reunite with his celestial queen among the living populations. Their joyful reconciliation brings a sudden surge of vibrant energy back to a waking world above. Fresh sweet water swells within winding canals, rushing smoothly over parched clay banks to nourish thirsty roots. The brilliant blooming of spring transforms barren deltas into a lush oasis of green abundance. They had created a predictable cycle of rest and renewal, proving that the dark realm of the netherworld is merely a resting place, not a permanent end. Life simply waits in hidden forms before sprouting anew across the fertile valleys of the earth. This sacred rhythm of a divided year anchors the entire terrestrial world in a profound state of grace, where every season of darkness is merely a necessary pause before the inevitable return of the light. A harmonious balance tethers the towering heavens above to silent depths of the earth below, and all the while the epic chronicle of Inanna and her beloved king lives forever within the ancient clay, standing as a timeless mirror of the cosmic laws that shape existence itself. This pristine earthen material serves as a permanent vessel, acting to beautifully capture her profound celestial journey. There is a comforting solace in knowing that such magnificent histories are preserved flawlessly beneath our very own feet. As the quiet night deepens over the vast mud-brick sanctuaries, the heavy shadows of the valley cradle the world in a protective embrace. The cooling breeze along the riverbanks softly dissolves the final echoes of the past, guiding the entire landscape into a deep and beautiful trance of undisturbed sleep.